What's up, everyone? My name's Joel Patterson. I'm a landscape photographer from the UK, currently living in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Today, I wanted to take you through my workflow of how I like to edit my images. First off, I'm going to start off in Lightroom to flatten the image out, and then I'll take it on over to Photoshop, where I'm going to add contrast back into the image using luminosity mask. I'm going to add a little bit of depth to the image and a little bit of glow. I'm not going to go too much into every adjustment I make, but that's probably going to be more for a future video, so I can go a bit more in depth to that. But if you have any questions, please leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Yeah, but let's get started. So I'm going to start off this image. It's a little dark, so I'm going to raise up the exposure to get a better view on it. And then I'm going to adjust my temperature, looking a little bit warm for my taste. So I'm going to bring it down quite a bit. Say around there for now. And then I'm going to change my tint to +1. I'm bringing down these highlights, bring down my whites. The highlights weren't clipping, but I want to get as much information there as possible when I'm over in Photoshop. Then I'm going to bring up the shadows, bring up the blacks, bring my black point up a little bit to around 7, just so it's not touching the edge on the histogram there. Maybe bring down these blacks just a little bit. Bring the exposure up a little bit more. I'm going to add some vibrance. Maybe around there. I will be adding contrast back in Photoshop, so I really need to watch how much saturation I'm putting into the image now, because when I add contrast back in, it will add saturation. I'm going to do some capture sharpening, so radius all the way to the left, detail all the way to the right. I'm going to hold Alt, click, slide my masking slider over, take that sharpening out of the water so it's not sharpening any noise. Remove chromatic aberration. I'm going to leave enable profile corrections off. I don't mind that vignette that it's doing. And let's see. I think I'm going to cool it down a little bit more. Still looking a little warm for me. Let's say around there. And I think that is, maybe I'll brighten up just a little bit more. I will be darkening it back down. I like to start with a pretty bright file when in Photoshop. I think that's it. I think it's ready to take over to Photoshop. So let's do that. I'm going to right click, go edit in, and then down to open a small object. The reason I like doing that is just then I can re-access the raw information if I need to. Now that we have this image opened up into Photoshop, I do want to make one quick little adjustment to the raw file. And because I opened it up into Photoshop as a small object, that's a really easy thing to do. I can just double click on this thumbnail right here, and that will open it up into Adobe Camera Raw, which has all my settings and adjustments that I've made inside of Lightroom. I'm just going to change the tint. I'm finding it just a little bit too much magenta for my taste. I'm going to take that down to -2 and click OK. So I want to start adding back the contrast back in this image that I lost by flattening it in Lightroom. And remember I said before, the reason I flatten my images, or that's why I like to do in Lightroom, is just to make sure that my histogram is all intact and I have all the information in the file. So to add contrast back in, what I like to do is use luminosity masks. I highly suggest checking out either Nick Page or Sean Bagshaw's websites. I'll leave links in the description below. They have some paid tutorials on there, and they go a lot more in depth than I can with the time that I have, explaining exactly what luminosity masks do. So definitely go check them out. So I'm going to try my best to quickly explain what luminosity masks are. Luminosity masks are masks or selections that are generated by the brightness values of your image. So for example, If I want to create an adjustment, but I only want it to affect the waterfall, I can go up into my panel and go into the lights section, and we'll start off with the lights one. So what that's done is pretty much turned my image into a black and white image. This is the mask. So this mask is protecting the darks because black conceals adjustments and white will reveal adjustments. So it's concealing any adjustment that I put onto this image in the darker tones. And then the opposite, obviously, is in the wider tones. That adjustment is going to show through a lot more. But for what I want to do is by just adjusting the waterfall, I can restrict this mask even more by going to a lights 2. So you can see it's more restricted. Only really the brightest highlights are showing. And I go to a lights 3 and it's restricted even more. I think I'm going to use this lights 3 mask as an example. I'm going to go to layer and then levels adjustment. So I'm going to brighten up my waterfall quite a bit just to show you as an example. And then you can see the before and after, how that adjustment is only showing through on the brightest parts of that mask. It's only coming through on that waterfall. It's not affecting anywhere else. And that's why luminosity masks are so powerful. But this is not where I want to first start with my image. Typically with all my images, I like to set the mood. I want to start darkening the image down. And the way I go about that is with a midtones 2. So I'll pick a midtones 2. I'm going to go layer and adjustment. And I'll put a levels adjustment on that luminosity mask. And I'm just going to bring down my midtones slider. And that's, for me, really starting to set the mood of the way I want my image to be. Then I'm going to bring up this highlight slider. And I'm also going to hold Alt as I do that. And it will show me where I'm starting to clip the highlights. But for this one, I'm not really too concerned about the water because I can just mask that out, and I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to bring the highlights, say, up to about there. And then I'm going to click on the mask itself. I'm going to go B for brush. And I want to paint that adjustment out of that water, out of the highlights of the waterfall, because they are clipping and I don't want that adjustment to show through there. So I've clicked on the mask. I'm going to press X on my keyboard to switch my paintbrush to black, because black conceals and white reveals. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go to 100% opacity. If you do want to change your opacity, you can just press the number keys on your keyboard. So if you press 1, it would be 10%, 2, 20%, 3, 30%, and onwards. I'm going to keep it at 100% because I want that adjustment taken out fully on the waterfall. Just like that. I'm going to take it out in these smaller waterfalls here. And I want to take it out on the water down here too. And I'm going to do a separate adjustment for the water itself. Just like that. See before and after. So that's before and that's after. And it just starts to add the mood to the image the way I want it. Now I'm going to make an adjustment to add a little bit of depth to the image. And the way I'm going to do that is by coming up here and creating a darks 4 mask, luminosity mask, going to layer and levels. And what I'm going to do is grab this black slider down here, which does the opposite from this one. This one darkens it down. This one brightens it up a little bit, or just brightens up those darker areas. I think 7 is going to be perfect for this, but I don't want this adjustment to be everywhere or as strong in the foreground. So that's how I'm going to create that sense of depth, is by taking it out of the foreground and the midground a little bit. So I'm going to go B for brush, click on the mask itself, and I'm going to use a 50% opacity. Got a black brush, and I'm just going to go over the foreground a little bit to take that adjustment out. Then I'm going to switch to 20% opacity by pressing the 2 key on my keyboard, and I'm going to come through this part of the image, the midground, and take that adjustment out a little bit more. And then obviously up in these trees, I don't want as much of an adjustment up there. And over on this side. And if I go before and after, you can just see how that's created. It's just softened up the image a little bit and created some depth and atmosphere. And another way I like to create atmosphere is by using light bleed and bring back the light that was coming through between the waterfall here and up in the trees here. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on this new layer icon. That will create a transparent layer. I'm going to change my blend mode to hard light. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Go B for brush. I'm going to pick a warmish color. Oh, let's do that again. And I don't want it too saturated. I'm going to pull it over to the left more to desaturate it. I'm going to start off with a small brush at about 70% opacity, and I'm going to click once, make the brush a little bit bigger, click again, make the brush a little bit bigger, and click again. And that's obviously a bit too much, so I'm going to bring down the opacity to around there. And the only issue with this is now it's in this tree. This tree here, the light bleed shouldn't be affecting. I don't mind if it affects it a bit, but not as much as it is. And the trees over here. So the way I'm going to get rid of that is I'm going to go up into my darks luminosity mask. See what a darks 2 does. It's not restrictive enough. And I'm going to go with this darks 3. I think that's looking good. As you can see, this is where when I mask in, taking out that adjustment, it's only going to affect the tree branches and a little bit back there, but I'll try and be careful when masking out that light bleed. So I'm going to go selection, and that will create a selection. I'm going to go Control H. Actually, let me go back. I messed that up a little bit. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to create a layer mask onto that layer. Then I'm going to go darks 3. Choose that selection. I go Control H to hide the hard marching ants, and make sure I click on the mask itself. Then I'm going to come up here, B for brush. I want to use a black brush at about, let's start off at 30%. And then I'm going to start painting this adjustment out of these branches here. Make the brush a little smaller. And start painting that light bleed out. I'm going to just do this quite fast. Usually I would take my time. I'm going to change my opacity up to 60 to really start getting this adjustment out, light bleed out. Just like that. It looks like I've gone over a little bit in the background here. So what I'm going to do is press X to change my brush to white. and add that light bleed back in. To anywhere that I might have taken it out. Go back to black. Really try and get it out of this branch here. I also want that adjustment out of these trees here. Well, at least some of the adjustment out. Put my opacity down to 30. Just lightly. Just to feather it in. We'll see how that looks. I'm going to go Control D to deselect that mask, and I'm going to really come in here and take that adjustment out of these parts of the tree. I might go a really low opacity. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change the opacity on this. I'm finding it that effect just too strong. We'll go down to 50%. Click before and after. I think that really helps with the depth of this image. I think that looks great. This is where we started from Lightroom, and this is where we currently are. See what this mask looks like. Well, you can see where I've taken that adjustment out heavily in the branches here. Okay, so now I want to add a Orton effect. This Orton effect I learned through one of Nick Page's videos he had on his YouTube channel. And I think it's a really great way of doing it. Just to add that bright, warm glow into your image. So how we're going to do that is we're going to create a merge visible layer by going Shift Control Alt E. And then with that layer, I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And you want your pixel radius to be about the same as the megapixel of your camera. So mine is a Nikon D810, which is around 36 megapixels, I think. And I click OK. I'm going to lower my opacity down to, say, 26. I want to come up to my lights luminosity mask. I'm going to click lights 1. And I'm going to apply that to that layer. So now what that's doing is that makes that Gaussian blur that I've put on is only going to show up in the brighter parts of the image. So as you can, well, you can't really see it yet. So now, but now I've got that on. I'm going to go Shift Control A to get Adobe Camera Raw, or you can go up to Filter and Adobe Camera Raw through that way. I'm going to add some warmth to my image. And remember, this is only going to be showing up in the highlights of the photo. I add a little bit of magenta, take up my exposure quite a way, say 55, give a bunch of contrast, add some vibrance, saturation, and that looks ridiculous. But you'll see right now what it looks like once it's applied to that layer. And it just gives it, zoom in a little bit. It's an Orton effect, but also bring in a warm glow. And I just think it's a really good technique, and it looks great. And now what I want to do next is add a vignette. I'm going to go do another merge visible layer. I'm going to do Shift Control Alt E. And then I'm going to go back into Camera Raw to do this effect. So I'm going to go Shift Control A, bring up Camera Raw, zoom out, go up to Radial Filter, start in the middle and drag outwards. And I drag out quite far because I really want this vignette to be quite feathered. I'm going to go Z and then zoom in. And then you bring in that vignette. What's a great way of doing it this way, the vignette, you can actually change your temperature too, which I do want to do. I want to add some blue into it to give the outside bit where the vignette is a cooler feeling, but then the inside a warmer temperature feeling. Then we'll go over that. And that's really added quite a big vignette to it, but it's very gradual and very feathered. And then I'm going to put a layer mask on that. Go B for brush, make sure my paint's black. I want to take that vignette out of the top here where the light comes in. I'm going to change my opacity to 100 and take it out from up there. And anywhere else it might come in a bit too much. Like that. Before, after. And that really just brings the eye into the middle of the image. So your focus is more now on the waterfall. And it's not, your eye's not drifting too far out of the photo. Next thing I want to do is just add a little bit more of that. I just want to create a bit more attention into the middle here that keeps your eye in there and flow through the image better. Do that. I'm going to go brightness contrast. I'm going to bring up the brightness slightly and the contrast. I'm going to invert this mask by going Control I. That puts a black layer mask on it, which conceals that adjustment. I got B for brush again. I'm going to press the X key, change my paint to white, and I'm going to go 50% opacity and just start bringing it in a little bit here. And just allows the eye to focus more on this part of the image in the middle. Let's see, what else do I want to do? Oh, I want to adjust the waterfall. I want to add a bit of contrast into the waterfall, some detail. So I'm going to go into my lights, luminosity mask. I'm going to choose I'm going to go with the lights 2. I think the lights 3 is just a bit too restricted. I'm going to go layer, levels, and I'm going to bring down my midtones quite a ways, and then bring up those highlights. About there. See what that's done. So it's dark on the waterfall down a bit. I don't want it to be too dark. I'm just trying to add a little bit of dimension into that waterfall. I was going to mask it out in certain places on the mask, but I'm actually quite liking what it's done to the whole image. So I'm going to leave that. All right, now we're towards the end. The one thing I like to do at the very end of my images, before I do a bit of cleanup, is I like to go into color balance. And I usually only stick with the midtones, and I just, mainly what I do is I just bring these sliders left to right until it looks pleasing to the eye. Why, whilst I don't stare at the sliders, I stare at the image, and I stop when I think I like what I'm seeing. So I just go back and forth and then slow down. Say about there. Let's do the greens and magentas, same thing. There. Oh, stayed at 0. No adjustment needed there. And then the same with the yellows and blues. One thing about there is good. See what the before and after looks with that adjustment. So it's cooled the whole image down. And I like that. I felt like it was looking a little bit warm here. So just bringing down that temperature, but doing it through a color balance, just really balances the image out more. Okay, and the last thing I want to do is just a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to create another merge visible. You can do this. Oh, what have I done here? You can do this at the beginning of the image. I like to do it towards the end. So I create a merge visible. Go J, which is this one up here. It's the spot healing brush tool. Forgot what it's called, so I had to wait for that info thing to pop up. And I'm going to start just taking out any distractions like these branches here. I find them a little distracting. I do like to keep, oh no, that's all right. I do like to keep the edges of my photo as clean as possible. So there's nothing distracting the eye and wanting to take the eye out of the frame. Oh, wrong one, J again. It can be a little tedious, but it definitely helps. I'm going to take this rock out. Whatever this is, I think that's a rock, another rock. Take that out. And take these little branches out. Take some of this sensor dust out. Looks good. Even like just little things like this. Sometimes good to remove. I think that looks pretty good. Oh, and this line in here, it's kind of bugging me a bit. I just kept looking at it, so I'm going to take that out. Found it a little distracting. And this one here. And that's it. I'm going to call this image done. So let's see where we started on this image and where we ended up. I'm going to hold shift, click this lower layer, put that in a group, and then we'll go before, after, before, after. So it's quite a big change. I'm liking the way this image ended up though. If you guys have any questions about how I edited this image, please leave them down below, or any questions whatsoever. Just leave them down below in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everyone.